You guys have survived week one. We're on to week two with distance learning and U.S. government. Today we're going to begin to talk about Congress, and we're going to start with the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is going to be, we're going to go over for 2 weeks actually. Congress we're going to go over for 2 weeks. This week will be House of Representatives. Next week will be the Senate. Let's talk about the House of Representatives first. We know that Congress is our legislative body that writes the laws for our country. It's divided into two houses. That's called a bicameral legislature, bi being two. The House of Representatives is currently made up of 435 seats. That means there's 435 members of the House of Representatives, and these seats are distributed amongst the states depending on how big the state is. So if a state is bigger, it has more seats, like California and Texas. If it's smaller, it has less seats, like Rhode Island. Florida currently is the fourth largest state, so we have the fourth amount of seats in the House of Representatives. Each state is guaranteed at least one seat no matter what. So if it's like a really tiny state like Rhode Island, they still get a seat. When you are elected to the House of Representatives, you serve for a 2-year term. That each term you represent a particular district. That's the area, the actual area in the state that you represent. The people that are there that you represent are called your electorate. That district that you are in, it's not like, it's not like square districts. It's drawn to try to keep some equality amongst the people. So every one of the districts in a particular state will be ideally drawn so that that you can have equality in numbers of rich and poor and minorities and based on race, socioeconomic status, all that kind of stuff. Ideally, that's the perfect situation. We know that the districts are drawn by the political party that is in control of the state legislature. They kind of like to remain in control. So often when they draw the districts, they don't draw them as equally as we would like them to be drawn. That's called gerrymandering. The term gerrymandering comes from a political cartoon from 100 years ago. A guy by the name of Jerry was running, and his district was drawn so goofy, it looked like a salamander, gerrymandering. And that's where that term comes from. No big deal. You don't need to know that. It's just a silly story in history. When you are elected to the House of Representatives, you can be reelected forever. So you can be elected as a 25-year-old and be there until you're 95 years old. It's perfectly allowed. There are actually only 3 requirements to become a member of the House of Representatives. Got to be at least 25 years old. So believe it or not, you guys are 7 years away from potentially being a member of the House of Representatives. You have to live in the United States for 7 years. And you have to live in the state of which you represent. So you can't live in California and represent Florida. That's not allowed. You don't have to be born in the U.S. You can be born in another country, become a citizen, and then run for Congress. It's perfectly allowed. The House of Representatives, of the 435 members, there is a leadership, that things are built up. Whatever party has the majority, meaning it has the more amount of members in the House of Representatives, is the majority party, and they elect the Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House is the person in charge. Each party has what's called party whips. The whip is a person that represents the party leadership and reminds the members of the political party how to vote on certain bills. So literally they may come to your office and say, hey, don't forget on House Bill 1302, we want you to vote against that. That's not something we're in support of. So that's the job of the whip. But the whip is in that the hierarchy of power within Congress. Both parties have it. The party in majority and the minority party also will have that as well. Members of Congress, believe it or not, get to pick their own pay. They decide how much they're going to get paid. James Madison when he wrote the original 10 amendments to the Constitution, one of the other amendments he wrote was about congressional pay. And it was written in 1789. It didn't actually get amended to the U.S. Constitution until 1992. So for 200 years, Congress just gave themselves a raise whenever they wanted to. As of 1992, so for the last almost 30 years, if Congress wants a raise now, they can give themselves a raise, but it doesn't go into effect until after the next election. So if you want that raise that you just gave yourself, you need to win the re-election so that you get that pay increase. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. If part of the process of understanding Congress is understanding what powers Congress has. And really, there's two types of powers. We've talked about this already in class before. We've talked about express powers and implied powers. Express powers are powers that are written right in the Constitution. You can do this, you cannot do this, that type of stuff. That is expressed. Implied are powers that are given to government so that they can enact express powers. The example that I gave you in class already about this was Gibbons v. Ogden, that Supreme Court case. Remember, it was about the steamboats between New York and New Jersey and who controls that waterway. And the state of New York said, oh, New York controls the waterway, and the United States government says, no, the U.S. controls that, because it wasn't written in there about who can control the waterways. But what was written in Congress was that Congress is in charge of commerce, in charge of trade between the states. So if a boat went from New York to New Jersey, that automatically means commerce, that means trade, that means the federal government controls it, not state government. And that also adds to the supremacy clause, which we've talked about as well, that think about that layered cake we've talked about, that the upper layer is the federal government, the middle layer is the state government, and the bottom layer is local government. So Gibbons v. Ogden kind of addresses those two things. That's the implied powers. Again, express powers are stuff written in the Constitution. And then the last thing I want to go over with you real quick is the beginning process of how a bill becomes a law. We're going to actually do a whole week about this, but I can't skip over some of what roles the House of Representatives has with that now and wait for us to talk about it in a few weeks. I want to go ahead and touch on it now, or begin the process of understanding it now. Look, the main job of Congress is to pass laws for our country. We're seeing that with everything with the coronavirus going on right now, the Senate right now, which I know we'll talk about that next week, but the Senate is arguing over how to help the economy, and they're arguing, the Democrats and Republicans are arguing over what bill would be the best idea of trying to help the economy. The House of Representatives is also doing their own version of this. This is the job of Congress. Now, the majority of laws, on average, a congressional term is only 2 years. So if they say what term of Congress this is, it started in 1789 to 1791. That was term one. 1791 to 1793 was term two, et cetera. And you go all the way up to today. We're in the 2019 to 2021 term is where we are right now. This concept of the job of Congress to write bills on any given 2-year session, Congress maybe passes 200 laws in a 2-year time period. But of those 200 laws, the number one thing that they pass laws of, believe it or not, is the naming of post offices. No one ever argues with the naming of a post office. As our country continues to grow, more cities pop up, which means more post offices pop up. That's the number one thing Congress actually does. Of the other 100, on average, the other 100 bills that are passed into becoming the process of becoming law, that is Congress's main job. That process begins with an idea. Someone has an idea. It could be you, could be me, could be a member of Congress, could be a company. It could be a state government applying to have a federal law passed. An idea can come from anywhere. And it gets given to a member of the House of Representatives or the Senate, but we're talking about the House right now. It gets given to a member of the House. That person will write this idea and turn it into a bill. They become the bill sponsor. Ideally, if you're in one party and you could get someone to co-sponsor the bill with you from the other party, that means you guys are working together. You're crossing the party aisleway. You are working towards the greater good because you're not just doing what a party says. You're doing what is best for the country or your state or wherever you happen to be writing the bill for. That once there is a process that we'll get into more detail, but part of that process is this bill is given to a committee that is the most appropriate committee to deal with that particular topic of that bill. The committee then will spend time investigating that potential bill to see whether it is something that is worthwhile becoming a law. And they may even go from a committee to a smaller subcommittee to specifically investigate it, get witnesses to come up to talk about it, to better understand what the circumstances of that bill are, so that they can decide whether or not it can be advanced. And so I just kind of want to introduce that concept to you. We will get into that more as we go forward with how a bill becomes a law in a few weeks. The other thing I want to tell you with this particular, so we're on to week 2. There are 3 videos, this one plus 2 other videos I'm going to ask you to watch and write about. There are notes. There are 13 terms to identify. There is a short little project, and really the project is to look at 3 particular documents, and then using this video and the other videos I give you, plus the notes, plus these documents, answer 3 questions. It's not very hard for you to do. It's something that shouldn't take you very much time at all. Then you need to do the lesson comprehension survey, which the link will be on Canvas. And then you have your Canvas quiz. So I'm giving it to you on Monday. You got till Friday to get done with all this stuff. If you got any questions along the process, remember, I'm accessible via email from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, Monday through Friday next week. Shoot me an email. You can send it to me in Canvas. You can send it to me through our normal email system at thomas.beard@ocps.net. Whatever you need to do, if you got a question, reach out to me, and we'll get through this process. Hopefully we'll be back on April 15th, so keep your fingers crossed.